The reading of my stepfather's will was held in the same oak-paneled library where, at age 7, I'd been told my finger paintings weren't suitable for the refrigerator. "This is a home of taste, Meredith," Mercy, my stepmother, had said gently, taking my colorful blob of a sun and placing it in a drawer instead. "Some things are best kept private." 28 years later, I kept myself private, a silent ghost in a corner chair, while the family I'd never belonged to decided my future, or rather, ended it. The entirety of my estate, including the primary residence, investment portfolios, and my controlling share in Coleman Industries, shall pass to my beloved children Lucas and Isabel Coleman. My stepbrother, Lucas, didn't bother to hide his smirk. His sister, Isabel, offered me a saccharine, pitying smile that made my skin crawl. They were both in their late 20s, polished products of elite boarding schools and unconditional parental adoration. I was the charity case, Allison Webb, the daughter of the woman their father, Robert Coleman, had married when I was 5, a woman who had died 10 months ago. Robert himself was still speaking, his video-recorded testament playing on a large screen, his face as stern in death as it had been in life. To my stepdaughter, Allison Webb, I leave the sum of $50,000 in recognition of her prolonged residency in my home. It is my hope this provides for a modest, fresh start. The recording flickered off. The room, heavy with the scent of old books and new money, was silent for a beat before Lucas snorted. "A generous parting gift for a glorified house guest, don't you think, Allie?" The attorney, a severe woman named Miss Thomas, adjusted her glasses. "That concludes the primary will. However, there is a second matter to be addressed, pertaining to the estate of the late Gwendolyn Webb, Allison's mother." I stiffened. My mother had been a landscape architect with, as far as I knew, a modest savings account and a collection of antique gardening books. Robert had controlled all the finances. What estate could there be? Mrs. Coleman, Gwendolyn, executed a separate trust prior to her marriage to Mr. Coleman, a trust of which he was never made aware per its specific structuring. Lucas leaned forward, his amusement fading. "What are you talking about? My father managed all of Mom's affairs." "Your stepmother's affairs," Miss Thomas corrected coolly, "and not all of them. The Gwendolyn Webb Revocable Trust was established with assets from the sale of her parents' business, Webb Botanical Innovations, in 1991. The principal has been held and managed independently for the past 33 years. Isabel's perfectly sculpted brow furrowed. "That's a flower shop. They sold a flower shop?" "They sold a patented horticultural biotechnology process to a multinational agricultural firm," Miss Thomas replied, her voice dry, "for $42 million. Gwendolyn's share, placed in trust, has, through conservative investment, grown to approximately $31 million. The number didn't just hang in the air, it detonated. Robert's entire estate was worth maybe $15 million. Lucas paled. Isabel's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. I felt the room tilt. My grandparents? The ones who lived in the bungalow in Santa Barbara, who sent me pressed flowers for my birthday? The same. Miss Thomas's gaze shifted to me, and for the first time her expression held a hint of something other than professional detachment. They were intensely private people. They distrusted Robert Coleman's motives from the start. The trust was their condition for blessing the marriage. It was designed to be spousal opaque, invisible and inaccessible to a husband. The principle, and all its growth, was to pass solely to Gwendolyn's biological descendant, you, Allison. "This is absurd," Lucas slammed a hand on the table. Dad would have known. He was a financial genius. He was unaware because your stepmother and her legal team were meticulous. The trust had its own dedicated law firm, its own financial advisors, a separate post office box, a bank account he never saw. Miss Thomas pushed a stack of documents toward me. Additionally, Gwendolyn was not merely a passive beneficiary. She was an active, shrewd investor. She directed the trust's management quarterly. My mind was a riot of contradictions. My mother, who had chosen her clothes from clearance racks, who had apologized to Robert for buying the wrong brand of olive oil, who had seemed so financially anxious, she had been a secret millionaire. No, a secret deca-millionaire. "There's more," Miss Thomas said, and the room, which had been buzzing with Lucas's sputtered protests, fell silent again. She produced another binder, this one filled with charts, disbursement records, and copies of handwritten notes in my mother's looping script. The trust generated substantial annual income. Your mother accessed these funds not for herself, but for you, Allison, in ways designed to be untraceable back to her. She began to lay out the evidence of my life rewritten. The Havenwood Foundation scholarship that covered your private high school tuition after Robert refused to pay it, that was the trust. The career launch grant that allowed you to take the unpaid internship at the museum, the trust. The anonymous donation to your college fund that matched every dollar you saved from your diner job, the trust. The down payment assistance program you won for your first apartment, orchestrated by the trust. The research fellowship that funded your master's degree in art history, the trust. Page after page, a secret financial history unfolded. Every lucky break, every unexpected opportunity, every time I'd scraped by and believed it was my own grit that saved me, it had been her, a ghost in the machinery of my life, oiling the gears. Tears blurred the precise lines of the legal documents. All those years of living small, of feeling like a beggar in a palace, of enduring Robert's subtle barbs. Community college would be a practical choice for you, Allison. And Lucas's open contempt, another liberal arts degree, how quaint. I had worn my hard-won achievements like armor, proud that I'd made something of myself despite them. Now I learned the armor had been forged in her secret workshop. Why? The word cracked out of me. Why didn't she tell me? She could have left him. We could have left. Ms. Thomas's demeanor softened a fraction. She considered it, often, but she feared his retaliation, not just legal, though he would have fought for control of the trust with everything he had, but personal. She believed he would weaponize his influence, his connections, to make your lives difficult. And she paused, glancing at Lucas and Isabel, who were staring with a mixture of fury and incomprehension. She felt a responsibility to them. They were children. Leaving would have meant abandoning them to his worldview entirely. She hoped to provide a counterbalance. A fresh wave of understanding, more painful than the first, washed over me. My mother had stayed in her gilded cage, not out of weakness, but out of a fierce, divided loyalty. She stayed to shield me and to soften the edges of Robert's toxicity for the two children who weren't hers, but whom she'd helped raise. The same children who now looked at me with naked hatred. "This is theft," Isabel hissed, finding her voice. "She stole from our family. That money should be part of Dad's estate." Legally, it never was. It was always separate. Furthermore, Gwendolyn's personal will, distinct from the trust, does leave bequests to you both, $150,000 each from her non-trust assets. Lucas let out a harsh laugh. $150,000? She gives the help $31 million and her actual family gets pocket change? I was her actual family, I said, the words quiet but clear. It was the first time I had spoken with any authority in that house. The sound of it surprised even me. The meeting dissolved into threats and legal jargon. They would contest, they would sue, they would expose this fraud. Miss Thomas remained an island of calm. The trust has been stress-tested by 3 separate top-tier estate law firms over 3 decades. It is, in their professional opinions, impregnable. Litigation will be lengthy, public, and almost certainly unsuccessful. I would advise against it. I barely heard them. I was clutching a sealed envelope Miss Thomas had handed me along with the documents, addressed in my mother's handwriting. For my Allison when the time comes. I read the letter in the sterile silence of my own apartment, a far cry from the Coleman mansion. The paper smelled faintly of her lavender sachet. My dearest girl, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you finally know my greatest secret. Forgive me for the deception. It was the only armor I could give you that Robert couldn't strip away. Your father, your real father, Thomas, was my sunlight. When he was taken, the world went gray. Robert offered to repaint it in gold, and I was too grief-stricken and too afraid of struggling alone to see it was fool's gold. By the time I saw his true colors, the control, the coldness, the way his eyes would narrow when you laughed too loudly, it was too late. You were entrenched in his world, and Lucas and Isabel were babies. I couldn't leave. If I had, Robert would have destroyed you to punish me. He would have fought for custody not out of love, but out of possession. He would have turned you against me, or worse, crushed your spirit utterly. And I couldn't abandon those 2 innocent children to be molded into his image. So I stayed. And I fought my war in the only way I could, in secret. Every scholarship, every lucky break, that was me cheering from the shadows, watching you turn into this resilient, compassionate, brilliant woman has been the profound joy of my life. The money is not just money, my love. It is every hug I held back when he was watching, every word of praise I swallowed, every dream for you I whispered into the dark. It is my love made tangible. Use it to build a life of unapologetic joy. Buy a house and paint every room a color that would give Robert a headache. Travel to see every painting you've ever studied. Fund a gallery for artists no one else believes in. Live loudly, fully. And know this above all. You were never an afterthought. You were my first thought, every single day. All my love, forever. Mom. P.S. Your grandmother's pearls are in a safety deposit box at the First Federal on Grand. The code is your birthday. I saved them from Robert, too. Wear them and think of the women who came before you. We are all with you. The lawsuit arrived, as predicted. Lucas and Isabel, bankrolled by Robert's diminished estate, alleged coercion, incompetence, and fraud. They painted my mother as a manipulated simpleton and me as a conspirator. The discovery process was brutal, invasive, and ultimately their undoing. My mother's meticulous records were her testimony from beyond the grave. Meeting notes with her financial advisor from 1998, handwritten investment philosophies, letters to the trust's protector asking to increase the anonymous grant amounts to keep pace with my rising tuition. The narrative that emerged was not of a victim, but of a strategic, patient general conducting a decades-long campaign. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice, her ruling elegantly brutal. The evidence does not show a woman under duress, but a woman of exceptional foresight and resolve. The plaintiff's case appears rooted not in legal grievances, but in the shocking discovery that a woman they perceived as subordinate possessed greater autonomy and acumen than they credited. That is not grounds for relief. They were ordered to pay my legal fees, a cool $425,000. The call from Lucas came on a rainy Tuesday 6 months later. His voice, usually so full of entitled confidence, was thin. "Allison, we need to talk." We met at the public gardens my mother had helped design years ago. It was her territory, not theirs. He looked hollowed out. "The legal bills, they forced us to sell the house." "The house," he said, not looking at me. "Isabel she's not taking it well." I said nothing. The Coleman mansion, that monument to cold perfection, was gone. I felt nothing about it. "He never knew," Lucas whispered, finally meeting my eyes. "Dad died thinking he was the smartest man in every room, thinking she stayed because she had no other options. He was the option." "He was a prison," I said softly. Lucas flinched. "She paid for things. For us, too, didn't she? The summer programs in Europe, the family friend who sponsored my startup seed money." I hadn't known, but it made sense. My mother's compassion had been boundless, even for those who didn't deserve it. "Probably." He nodded, a broken, jerky motion. "All those years, we thought we were the priority, the real Colemans, but we were just other people in the room. You were her mission." He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted confirmation that the story he'd built his identity on was a lie. I gave it to him with my silence. I never heard from Isabel again. Lucas sent a terse email a year later when he moved to another state. The tie was severed not with drama, but with the quiet finality of a door closing on an empty room. The money, once a shocking abstraction, became a tool. I established the Gwen Webb Foundation, dedicated to providing stealth support, emergency funds for single parents, unseen tuition top-ups, anonymous grants for artists and scholars. We operated on my mother's principle. The most powerful gift often lets the receiver believe they earned it themselves. My grandmother's pearls I wear often. They are not a statement of wealth, but a talisman. 3 generations of women, my pragmatic grandmother, my secret warrior mother, and now me, linked by a strand of cultivated beauty and quiet strength. Robert Coleman's obituary was brief and proud. It listed his accomplishments and his devoted children, Lucas and Isabel. My name was absent, as was my mother's true legacy. I attended the small graveside service, standing under a distant tree. I went not for closure, but for confirmation. Seeing Lucas and Isabel, now graying and diminished by their bitterness, flanking a headstone that bore only their father's name, I felt it. The story they would tell was small and sad. Ours, my mother's and mine, was vast. He died believing he had dictated the terms of our lives, that his will was the final binding word. He never grasped that the quiet woman arranging flowers in his solarium had written a different will altogether, in invisible ink over 30 long years. A story of patience, of hidden power, of love so deep it could work in shadows for decades, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. He thought he'd written me out of the narrative. He never realized my mother had been writing a whole different book, and from the very first page, I was the heroine.